Vamos a dar inicio con la mesa 6, que es sobre modelos e impresiones en 3D. Comenzamos con el trabajo de Mario Gerardo Canul Ku, Diego Jiménez Salvador Ruiz Correa y Rogelio Asimoto Beltrán, con el trabajo Búsqueda en catálogos de piezas arqueológicas mediante técnicas de aprendizaje automático y descriptores de formas 3D.
Bueno, pues buenas noches. Les agradezco de antemano por la segunda oportunidad que me dan en presentar un trabajo aquí en el Congreso. Y básicamente, aunque, ¿cómo decirlo? Básicamente lo que voy a hablar es sobre búsqueda en catálogo de piezas arqueológicas mediante técnicas de aprendizaje automático y descriptores de formas 3D. Ese trabajo forma parte de mi proyecto doctoral y trabajamos en conjunto con tres instituciones diferentes. El INAH, aparte, gracias al apoyo de Diego Jiménez, Salvador Ruiz Correa, que se encuentra en el Instituto de Mobili, que está en San Luis Potosí, y como sede de mi institución vengo del Centro de Matemáticas, y para variar voy a hablar de cosas de aprendizaje automático para búsqueda de modelos 3D. Básicamente para nosotros una forma 3D es esto, y en la actualidad, gracias a lo que vienen siendo los escáneres 3D, pues, los drones y etc., siempre podemos tener, o es altamente probable tener, pues una reconstrucción 3D del modelo 3D que queremos analizar, y con ello generar catálogos digitales, es decir, tener una infinidad de datos o gran cantidad de datos. Y con ellos pues queremos de alguna forma sacar información. Por ejemplo, aquí tenemos dos estatuas que, según me aprendí bien el nombre, es de Cutli, y pues los arqueólogos sé que tienen ya sus rasgos bien específicos de cómo identificar esta deidad, a pesar de que, digamos, yo estoy viendo dos objetos diferentes o dos formas diferentes, pero hay rasgos que identifican a esta deidad en particular, pero nos damos cuenta que esos rasgos pues tienen una geometría bastante compleja. Ahora, dada esa complejidad, ¿cómo computacionalmente se puede abstraer ese rasgo geométrico de tal forma que no sea subjetivo? Porque, según entiendo, los rasgos de cada pieza o de cada deidad difiere desde el punto de vista del arqueólogo, y en nuestro caso creemos que sea algo cuantitativo y que sea computable. Y con ello, pues nos dimos cuenta de que podemos hacer búsquedas automáticas. Básicamente, como lo mencionaba hace un rato, es como realizar una búsqueda en Google, pero Google, según entiendo, todavía no es capaz de hacer búsquedas a partir de modelos 3D. No dudo que no esté trabajando en ello, pero pues digamos que todavía ese motor de búsqueda no está disponible. Entonces, pues nos planteamos esta idea: ¿por qué no hacer un motor de búsqueda a partir de modelos 3D tal que nos dé, digamos, piezas relacionadas a piezas que se parezcan a lo que el arqueólogo necesita o lo que quiera consultar? Entonces, pues nos planteamos el problema de búsqueda en catálogos digitales, y aquí observamos que es un área de oportunidad bastante interesante, porque son pocos los estudios que están dedicados a estudiar piezas arqueológicas y mezclar lo que viene siendo técnicas de aprendizaje automático o de machine learning, como viene siendo big data u otras técnicas. Entonces, pues procedimos y decidimos entrar a eso. Y como nos podemos dar cuenta, pues no hay la herramienta. Entonces, bajo mi formación de ciencia de la computación, pues dijimos, pues si no hay que crearla. Entonces, pues nuestro objetivo principal fue, o mejor dicho, es combinar algoritmos de aprendizaje automático para representar y realizar búsqueda de forma 3D, pero de una forma general. Es decir, que no tengamos que especializarnos en identificar cierto tipo de objetos, sino queremos algo más general que pueda ser utilizado en diferentes áreas de la arqueología. Y básicamente lo que tenemos es el modelo 3D. Empezamos a trabajar primeramente con con máscaras o con ya piezas de figurillas, pero pues eso se puede ampliar desde análisis topológico de los levantamientos que se hacen, búsquedas aéreas, al fin y al cabo trabajamos con los datos 3D. De alguna forma tenemos que representarlos y con base a esa representación trabajar, porque la computadora necesita trabajar con datos cuantitativos y a través de esos datos pues aprender cómo hacer búsquedas inteligentes o cómo hacerlas automáticas. Y pues digamos que las contribuciones que queremos pues es que mediante el aprendizaje automático pretendamos proveer una herramienta, un sistema de búsqueda automática de formas 3D, y en particular pues estamos trabajando con los modelos 3D del Museo del Templo Mayor, pero también utilizamos unos otros datos que encontramos por internet y más adelante les voy a mostrar los resultados. Y pues básicamente sin tener que entrar en detalles técnicos, pues un modelo 3D se compone de un conjunto de puntos o nube de puntos, y esos puntos, digamos que si los vemos desde un marco de referencia, podemos describir ciertas propiedades geométricas, por ejemplo áreas, ángulos entre ellos, y a partir de ello pues generar un descriptor de forma, en donde básicamente un descriptor de forma es un arreglo numérico que de forma compacta está condensando información del modelo 3D que estoy viendo y a través de ello trabajar. Y bueno, aquí nada más muestro dos imágenes de dos tipos de descriptores de forma que son usuales, que viene siendo el descriptor armónica, el descriptor de componentes armónica y lo que viene siendo el de distribución de histogramas básicamente. Y ahí a manera de ejemplo estoy mostrando, aquí a manera de ejemplo estoy mostrando pues aquí la figura del Tlatelolco y cómo se van viendo los diferentes histogramas o distribuciones de este modelo a partir de diferentes propiedades geométricas, por ejemplo, distancia a su centro de masa, pues distancia entre ellos dos, área y cosas por el estilo de ecuaciones geométricas. Y aquí es donde viene la parte interesante o la parte de la contribución que estamos haciendo actualmente. Y el modelo de aprendizaje automático que estamos utilizando se conoce en la literatura como aprendizaje de métricas, donde básicamente una métrica nos permite comparar diferentes tipos o clases de modelos o formas 3D por medio de una distancia entre ellos. Y digamos que a partir de la imagen que estoy proyectando, es muy común que por ejemplo, objetos que pertenecen a una misma clase, si nosotros los visualizamos de manera espacial, pues digamos que pues no están como que juntitos, digamos máscara con máscara o estatua con estatua, y de alguna forma queremos transformarlos, tal que espacialmente pues ya se puedan, digamos que agrupar miembros de una misma clase, que por ejemplo aquí están las máscaras, bueno, están las estatuas, y pues están juntitas, es lo que nosotros queremos utilizar para hacer las comparaciones de una manera más efectiva. Y pues por información de Ciencia de Computación y del Centro de Medicina y Matemáticas, pues nada más les voy a referir que es en sí una distancia o una métrica. Básicamente es esto, es un parámetro que nos permite comparar dos tipos de objetos o dos descriptores, y el objetivo es encontrar el parámetro tal que para dado un conjunto o varios descriptores que corresponden a diferentes piezas arqueológicas de un catálogo enorme, los que son de una misma clase quizás estén dispersos o no estén dispersos, al encontrar ese parámetro nos permita que estos se encuentren cercanos. Ya para, digamos, concretar esa idea, es que originalmente aquí tenemos los datos o los descriptores. Si nos podemos dar cuenta, puede ser que miembros de diferentes clases estén sumamente cercanos, pero si encontramos el parámetro óptimo, vamos a convertirlos a otra forma, en donde los que son de una misma clase, en este caso los cuadritos azules corresponden a las máscaras y los triángulos a las estatuas. Podemos, digamos, separarlos de una forma adecuada. Y ya, a partir de eso, pues decidimos generar pues una metodología que sea general y que nos permita implementar de manera eficiente un sistema en donde pues tenga el usuario, tenga un modelo 3D que haya obtenido de alguna forma, ya sea en México o en otra parte del mundo, sin entrar en detalles de por qué debe estar en otra parte del mundo, pues quiere buscar dentro de un catálogo cuál se parece. Entonces el sistema se va a encargar de extraer o abstraer este modelo, mandárselo a un sistema que está puesto en cualquier otra parte del mundo, no necesariamente aquí en México. Ese se encarga de buscar en la base de datos, utiliza lo que viene siendo el parámetro que calculamos y simplemente me devuelve un listado de los objetos o las formas que se parecen, de forma que el orden de los resultados sea con respecto a la similaridad entre ellos, porque no me gustaría encontrar aquí máscara, una estatua, una máscara y otra estatua, sino que me gustaría que sean puras máscaras, por ejemplo. Y ya, con esto, a manera de prototipo, les voy a mostrar un video de lo que estamos realizando, de lo que ya tenemos desarrollado. Lo pueden visitar aquí, lo que viene siendo la página. Y pues es un trabajo que vamos a seguir mejorando. Y ahorita se los coloco. A ver. En esta parte pues les muestro lo que viene a ser la sección de búsqueda. Viene a ser un visualizador 3D en línea. No se requiere instalarse ningún tipo de programa, funciona en cualquier navegador, cualquier sistema operativo, desde Mac, Windows, Linux, el que usen. Incluso lo he probado con lo que viene siendo tabletas y equipos móviles y funciona bastante bien. Aquí a manera de ejemplo les muestro un catálogo que está subido en la red. Tenemos lo que vienen siendo las imágenes de los modelos que tenemos. Pues simplemente escogemos el que queremos visualizar. Se empieza a cargar. Después de un cierto tiempo, pues ya tenemos lo que es el modelo 3D. Y la ventaja es que podemos verlo desde diferentes ángulos, desde diferentes escalas, agrandarlo, podemos ver a un nivel de detalle que uno quiera. Y gracias a lo que viene siendo la tecnología HTML5, pues esto es una herramienta que va a seguir utilizando. Pero aún decir, tenemos un modelo, no tenemos dónde visualizarlo, pues simplemente agarramos, soltamos y ya podemos ver el modelo. En este caso corresponde a la máscara de Pacal. Y pues tenemos otro, igualmente lo jalamos. Si se dan cuenta, carga bastante rápido, no se requiere detalles de hardware y algo así. Y pues básicamente es lo que tenemos ahora. A ver. Pero pues la metodología puede ser muy bonita, quizá los conceptos teóricos suenan agradables, un poco abrumadores, qué sé yo, pero lo que queremos es ver si realmente funciona, que ese es el objetivo al menos de nuestro trabajo de investigación. Entonces pues utilizamos dos pruebas. El primero consiste en 300 piezas que han digitalizado en el Museo de Templo Mayor, las cuales están divididas en dos tipos, en estatua y máscara, y pues queremos encontrar o aprender la métrica adecuada para compararlas. El siguiente experimento que realizamos es a partir de esta base de datos que se encuentra en internet y es ampliamente utilizada para comparar qué tan efectivo qué tan efectivo es lo que viene siendo la búsqueda de la consulta que uno quiere hacer, y corresponde a lo que viene siendo modelos 3D de una galería, de vasijas de Grecia, y estos están divididos en 5 clases, de las cuales las pueden visualizar. Y pues como digo, tiene que funcionar, tiene que estar adecuada y coherente en la búsqueda, porque pues realmente queremos que funcione. Entonces aquí a manera de ejemplo estoy colocando un modelo 3D que sirve como modelo de consulta, y obtengo 5 resultados. Aquí por cuestiones de espacio solamente puse 5, porque puedo tener un listado de 10 hasta 20 elementos si quisiera. Y pues digamos que tiene cierta coherencia, al menos sí, bueno, esos 3 resultados sí corresponden, según entiendo, a la misma deidad. No sé si estoy equivocado, Diego me puede decir. Pero, digamos, no es muy, no corresponde, pero pues digamos que 3 o 4 de 5 pues es un resultado coherente y adecuado. Con el siguiente pues obtuvimos un resultado mucho mejor, porque pedimos este tipo de vasija y digamos que dio un resultado perfecto. Eso de manera cualitativa o visual. Pero aún así, por el formalismo que tenemos en la parte de ciencias, pues queremos que no solamente visualmente funcione, sino que queremos que aunque se repita el mismo experimento varias veces, digamos que estadísticamente queremos que tenga un comportamiento adecuado o que siempre se esté localizando y devolviendo la consulta adecuada de acuerdo a lo que el usuario pidió. Y pues aquí les presento unas gráficas que corresponden a, bueno, se llama Receiver Upper Computing, que básicamente es una forma visual de ver qué tan bien se está comportando el que viene siendo el sistema al momento de devolver los resultados, pero de manera estadística. Y mientras más cercano esté hacia lo que viene siendo el 1, pues mejor está el comportamiento. En este caso, para lo que viene siendo el experimento del Museo del Templo Mayor, pues vemos que está casi perfecto, o sea, nada más es una pequeña variación. Con el otro pues sí tuvimos un poquito más pues sí son buenos, pero no son perfectos. El motivo es porque estamos clasificando 5 tipos de objetos. El objetivo es que el sistema pueda funcionar con diferentes categorías y que tenga un comportamiento adecuado, tal que el usuario diga, quiero buscar este objeto que me encontré en tal lugar y quiero que me devuelvan los que más se parezcan. Y pues yo con eso concluyo mi parte, pues digamos que sigamos trabajando y pues no sé si tiene algunas preguntas y quise ser un poco más fluido para poder tener tiempo de preguntas.
Gracias.
Básicamente.
Al finalizar, damos tiempo para preguntas. Gracias. Los autores del siguiente trabajo son Arturo Hernández y Helen Hobler. El trabajo se intitula Using 3D Printed Models to Help Us Ask Deeper Questions of Ancient Rituals. Lo va a presentar Arturo Hernández. Por favor.
Hi. First, I would like to thank INAH and all the committee members for selecting me and having me here. Thank you for everyone backstage running this. I really appreciate it. My name is Arturo Hernández, and I am a student from Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa. And I'm here to kind of tell you a little bit about the project that I'm involved with. That deals with tombs of Monte Alban and using technology as a means to learn more about its past. And so the creation and continuation of this project is led by my advisor and professor, Ellen Hubler, who unfortunately isn't here tonight. She's an art history professor at Cornell College, and she's also a specialist in pre-Columbian art and also art in Oaxaca. Also, a side note, I will also be answering questions in Spanish after. No se preocupan, puedo contestar sus preguntas en español más a rato. But for now, I'm just going to keep going. So my talk today will be a little bit about some of the work that I've done. I worked this summer on Tomb 104, and I will talk a little bit about a mystery object, a case where we get to learn a little bit more about some of the rituals, just tying to the main theme. Also, I will talk about some of the ancient rituals seen in Monte Alban and how we can better understand them. And And finally, I'm also going to talk about the project's previous work and also the future plans. Some of the previous work might be work from other students that have worked on this project and also work of my advisor. All right, so first of all, Monte Alban has gone through extensive excavations in the 1930s and 40s, and it was led under, for 18 seasons under Alfonso Caso. The archaeological zone hence its rituals have long been a problem for scholars. The first problem is that a lot of the materials have never been published by its main explorer, Alfonso Caso, and he planned to publish his work on the site in 7 volumes and different aspects of the site, of which one was to deal with the tombs. But he never finished his work on the tombs and published only 3 volumes, as you can see from the right-hand side. And in this project, I worked particularly based off this book, La Cerámica de Monte Alban, which gave detailed images and sketches and also descriptions of the objects, but just the ceramic pieces found in Monte Alban and the tombs. And so also what's problematic for scholars is that the Spanish accounts of Zapotec rituals is like less complete and deal with 700 years after the fall of its main capital of Monte Alban. So there isn't a lot of information out there about them because it was abandoned after 700 years, and we know a small amount. Also, what is particularly problematic is that the tombs had a particular pattern in their location, and so Caso and his workers knew this, and when they knew this, it created this big potential for looters to come and just rob the tombs of their artifacts. So it is assumed that that's the reason why Caso, under 18 seasons, was just excavated 165 tombs. And the Zapotecs would have their tombs located usually underneath the patios of elite residents and palaces. And after being used to bury someone, they were covered with stone or wood, and then the patio was replastered over and left alone, perhaps until it was time to bury someone else. Or perhaps during its time, they were occasionally open for some kind of commemoration rituals. These spaces had to be carefully planned, often being carved out of the bedrock before the house itself was constructed. Most are long chambers, almost always oriented east to west, with the entrance to the east, often made cruciforms so as you can see, that's where these tombs would be located in the center of these, or the patio of these palaces or elite residences. And so this is also the tombs of a given home was always located under the floor, and so it's usually still visible. And what's important is that these tombs were left as they were by the Zapotecs, and that's very important because Caso had documented all his finds with these catalog cards, and in total, the full catalog of these cards was about 10,000 cards. And that was mentioned in a 1930s article by Caso's collaborator, Jorge Acosta, mentioned that figure. And during my advisor's research, she was given permission to see some of these cards. And from her dissertation, I was able to work from these cards, and each card being a register of each object or group of objects from excavations, showing information about size, not only size, but form, material, ceramic type, pigment type, and in some cases, even the contents of the objects. They are really important in some cases to show the object's color. Some of these objects, or some of these cards even had watercolor images on them, which was useful because the color would often just fade away from the objects when they were later found, and or even worse, like some of these objects were lost altogether because they were unfired or even broken. So, and another thing to add also, which is exciting about these catalog cards, is that each card listed the object's location, the object's placement, kind of gives us in centimeters from where they were located. So this possibility of reconstructing where they were is very high. So now I'm going to dive a little bit about 2104 and my summer research and its mystery object. So with 2104, the past summer I worked, and my goal was to be able to create models of the objects and to help a community museum facilitate and control interpretation of their ancestral heritage with the help of technology. And from my project, I would like to highlight a case where 3D printing aids in us asking deeper questions for understanding more of the cultural past and its rituals. So in La Cerámica de Monte Albán, we see that Caso pieced together an interpretation of the mystery object, which he describes as a bowl with a small cup inside. To begin, that object appeared in the transition period between Monte Albán 3A and 3B. And so here we see some of the photographs and some of the sketches that were on these catalog cards, and also one of the sketches in the book. And of course, this summer, my job was to create models and also 3D print this object. And that was done successfully with the help of the software, Cinema 4D, and Blender was the open source option, which I got to use later on. Cinema 4D was the option we had because we already had the license to it from the previous summer students who worked with this project. And for 3D printing, our school owns the MakerBot replicator, and that was used to 3D print, obviously. But we also had a second 3D printer, which was the Cube Pro, and that allowed us to also print these objects as well. And so now, okay. So modeling was carried out, using all this software, and also with the help of our school having these printers, we were able to print these objects out. But these objects kept popping up, coming up, especially before the transition period, 3A to 3B, and so they still kept fitting this description of a bowl with a small cup inside. And in 3A period, we see those two images up there that the one on the right, especially, that one is from the book. And it's one of these mysterious objects that is found with being used as a lid, basically, but the others are not. So we can't really say that their purpose was that they served as lids, because often we would find them not being utilized in that way. So the other curious thing about this same kind of object is that they appeared in Álbum de Colecciones Arqueológicas, Láminas 58 al 3, and that's that piece right there. Is that that one is found in El Valle de Mexico, which is a little bit far away from Monte Albán. And so these objects, as you can see, Caso tells us that these objects appear like 17th century saucers, which were used to serve hot chocolate, and they're known as mancerinas. And although that was his idea of what these objects were used for, I think they're certainly wrong, because when we 3D printed them, this is the size of what they came out of. And so as you can tell, this is not, you can kind of tell that this isn't gonna serve hot chocolate for Monte Albán's Zapotecs, and so we see that with this case, his interpretation is clearly wrong, and also his other thought is that it might have been used to hold tamales at the ends and maybe salsa in the center, but that's a little bit absurd, right? But still, Caso and his team are still unable to see what these objects are used for. So they're pretty mysterious, and these objects are no longer seen after 3B, as I mentioned, and it has us 14,000 years later asking what these objects might be. So I'm going to turn to a case in Labitieco where the vessels for umbilical cords were discovered. And Javier Orcid is able to make us think about how both the placement and the relationship between objects can tell us a little bit more about the offerings and the rituals that took place, and also kind of their functionality. So first of all, in excavations at Lambidieco and near sites were vessels nested inside of each other, covered by a shallow bowl as a lid and buried beneath the courtyards or room floors of houses. At the time, there were no explanations for why these objects were found nested inside each other. So what happened was that then Ursid tells us that present-day Zapotecs placed the umbilical cord of newborns in a bowl covered with a shallow bowl as a lid and bury it beneath the courtyards or room floors of their houses. So it was by reaching out to the community of where the objects were found is he able to learn the purpose of these objects. And so in fact, we see a parallel of present-day practices and the excavated objects. Both the placement of the objects and the nested relationship of these objects show continuity of practice, which help discover the meaning behind these excavated objects. So yeah, just taking that idea from Ursid helped us just go to local museums, and here I'm going to talk a little bit about museums, histories, mysteries, because my advisor and I, we both went to a Czech and Slovak museum in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, close to Mount Vernon, Iowa, and we were able to see this exhibition space of a 19th century renovated immigrant home that had on display this mystery object, as you can see. And along with it was a piece of paper for anyone's suggestion to what the object might be. First of all, the idea was that my advisor, Ellen Hubler, and I were searching for ideas we can acquire from local museums in East Iowa to gauge the younger audience at a community museum in San Juan de la Villa. So yes, my advisor and I, we got into contact with this Museo Comunitario in San Juan de la Villa to kind of propose this idea of collaboration, and which is still in the process, by the way. We hope that by riffing off from, for lack of a better word, from the Czech Museum and their approach to solving the mystery object, we thought that it would be beneficial for us to use it, and especially for the visitors who visit museums to understand what an object is, and also for the culture and its people to kind of have a sense of their connection to the past, and also for the scholarly community. It's also important. But with working with this museum, we made sure that we do not present any attempt to control or the way their community museum is ran. Just keeping in conscious that, you know, in the end, it's because we want to work in collaboration, that we don't want to overstep anything, and yeah, that's a very conscious decision. So next is our drive for working with a community museum is because the objects that were transported away from being excavated, and knowledge from the past is unreachable for community members, especially the younger audience. So the objects that were found in Montalban, they were gone from its home, and so just using new technological ways to just bring them back is just, as you can see, we we brought this ahumador and this figurine and ear flares that kind of align to some of the objects they had. And you can see that the sahumador, here's the handle, and if a younger, audience member or a younger visitor didn't know what this was, easily make the connection with the 3D printed object. Or these ear flares, we took these ear flares and we attached these earring attachments, so they can go ahead and just play and just touch and feel these objects, because this is something that we see that museums currently are emphasizing, is the experience of visitors being allowed to touch and play with objects. And so that is the reason we took these objects and we brought them to this community museum to hopefully have a some sort of taller, just like a workshop in mind for the future. So next, ancient rituals seen in Montalban. Now, with this case, how we're connecting 3D modeling and 3D printing is that Templo Mayor's offering 46, we have this as sort of a model of how to have the idea that rituals taking place based off the location of where the objects were placed and where they were found. So yeah, Leonardo Lopez Lujan tells us that the placement of the objects in the tomb seemed to not be random, but followed some internal logic. It's instructive to look at the excavations of the Aztec Templo Mayor directed by him. He showed how the offering caches were arranged according to specific axes and seemed to function almost linguistically, apparently petitioning specific deities for their help. So a lot of these offering caches, offering 46, was considered an offering to the rain god to kind of, during their time of drought, to give more rain. So we see that Lujan sees these offerings as areas of activities that reflect the past existence of specific and repetitive religious acts. So with our previous example or a previous case, we can see how this kind of supports that. And also with this other case, Tomb 108, which was a project that was worked on by the previous students before me. So although the main chamber of the tomb was totally disturbed by water, as you can see here, this is an image of Tomb 118 before the excavation. And the main chamber of the tomb was disturbed by water. 2 niches on the sides were left undisturbed because they were covered by their rooftops. But the niche on the far end of the tomb was also was not left disturbed as well. However, the north niche had something totally unprecedented. There was a stone, and this is a 3D render of that niche. Was that there was a stone object that is basically a billy club, so that the mark of a warrior, quite likely, and by luck, there was a reference to this tomb in a published work about human remains at Montalban, and it's mentioned there was that there was also a human tibia, or shin bone, probably of a male, in the same niche. So that tibia might signify either a prisoner taken or more likely a powerful ancestor, since we know from other studies that ancient Zapotecs seem to have wielded bones of the ancestors as scepters of power and certain rituals. So this tomb is quite likely proof that this tradition of saving ancestors' bones as objects of power dates back to earlier than previously known. And so these niches, we can also see them as them being lifted up higher, that they have some higher significance in the ritual that took place, or as we can tell. And so that's what Lopez Lujan has us think, is that from his look at offerings 46, that the placement is certainly something to look at and not overlook. So now some of the perspectives that we can look at this from is that I think that there are three different perspectives. There's the scholarly, the pedagogical, and the public humanities perspectives. And from a scholarly work perspectives, for a small community of Oaxacan scholars, we can see this as pretty exciting. This is pretty exciting because we're now able to take these this data from these cards and actually physically make them and print them. But for the broader scholarly perspective, you can also see the virtual reconstructions as something great. But now from a pedagogical point of view, 3D is the visual language that students speak, these days. And these cards gave an opportunity for those two-dimensional drawings to grow into 3D. And so for the catalog cards to get a new life in virtual terms. The process of modeling raised many other questions and issues that were not obvious beforehand for me. And certainly the size and the outcome of this object was something to look at, and it just raised questions that the book and its description was kind of misleading. But finally, I like to consider the outcome of this project from a public humanities point of view. And a process like this could be used to 3D print at scale all objects in a given tomb and actually be able to handle them. And so that also copies could be in different locations, and archaeological objects found in locations that the objects that are found by local people might have been. So the objects that we see, they might have been from the ancestors of the people who found them, or we could think about it this way, and I guess this is more of a historical analysis of what happened in the past, and so this caused the 1980s a movement towards having small local community museums, which protected and preserved objects in the town from which they came. In many cases, it helped the people in the community too, because they had a place where they could bring their sensitive objects that they didn't want to keep in their homes. And people from town could look at these physical manifestations of their heritage wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted. These community museums have really taken off in Oaxaca in recent years. So yeah, we see that, and so this project's previous work and future plans, first off, some of its previous and still future plans is that we want to take Unity, which is a gaming platform or game engine, and be able to render these tombs, create them, and have a virtual tour of them. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a video. And so here, some of the summer students from last year, they were able to create this based off, so they were able to go to this site, and they were able to just see how these, how they could actually render this using Unity, the gaming engine, which is out for free, and mainly anyone can develop video games. And so they measured the tomb, they took pictures, and they were able to just paste it on and just create this. So it's really great what technology can do for us today. And Unity being an open platform allows us to just keep this kind of application of these objects, keep it current with its time, because if Unity is able to, in the future, change, the objects will still be able to be rendered in some way. And there's also just this huge gaming community that creates games like Assassin's Creed, and just a lot of gamers out there that still exist. And to take this and take it into a scholarly or pedagogical or maybe even to the public humanities perspective, this could be something that would be very exciting. If one of the issues of being able to experience this is, of course, travel. And so another thing, so for Tomb 104, the future plans for that is also to render the actual tomb itself and recreate it in Unity. Next, some of the this summer I was able to motion track video that I took of Tomb 118 and not being able to get into Tomb 104 because I didn't have any special access or anything. I just placed the objects of Tomb 104 to Tomb 118 because they're kind of similar in some ways. And I used an open source software. I used Blender, which is just open source, and it's available for free. And of course, also just taking Blender and Cinema 4D as animation and 3D modeling softwares, they, being commercial, allow us to just take models and just place them wherever they can. And so here, what I did was I was tracking each location of this video. Because this is a video sequence and images, of course, I had to go image by image, tracking the location of whether it was a piece of rock or a mark on the wall. I tracked it, and so this allowed us to actually place a 3D plane onto the video, and then hence we can add the 3D objects. So these are some screenshots of how this was done. There's the plane that we can add after we track the certain locations in the object in the video. And finally, this is our product of how we can place these objects in the tomb. This was also close to the actual location of these objects. So this can very much reconstruct just how these objects were found at the time. And finally, just skip over here. And finally, Google Cardboard this is kind of future plan still, is that they created this project where they can use anyone can use their smartphone. So if you have an iPhone or if you have an Android phone, you can take your smartphone and you can go ahead and very cheaply make or purchase one of these VR viewers here. And so virtual reality is very much possible now and a lot cheaper now. This costs like $14, which is 140 pesos, roughly. And you can take that and and you can, of course, create your own apps. They have APIs available on the Google Cardboard website, and they have this Google Cardboard app which lets you see kind of what you can do with this software or with this API, and sort of take it. Here are just like images of locations, and so it's kind of showing off like what you can do. There's a lot of possibilities, and with the objects, what we can do is also we could have them be viewed in these viewers like they are here in this video as they're shown. This, of course, is just Google's way of just showing us what can be done, and so the future is pretty much taking our objects and maybe creating an app which wouldn't be too difficult, just given that there's a way for this. They kind of set up a tutorial on how to do it. They give you a sample code for the general basis of these apps, so it's not entirely hard. So yeah, and so yeah, I would just like to conclude that I will suggest that the act of being able to see these 3D virtual objects in new ways that clash with our daily use of technology like smartphones, or playing video games, or just interacting with them in a different way, just has us think differently about these objects in a particular setting. Also, physically experiencing objects is just you get to look at the scale, the size, and shape of these printed objects, and question, and just contributes so much substantially to our understanding of rituals and spaces in which they were carried out, without any wear or tear of the actual object. Many other rituals, spaces, whether offering caches or tombs, might benefit from the same kind of replication and investigation. So hopefully our approach can serve as a model for other scholars, or just anyone who's really interested in this idea of using technology and yeah, just cultural heritage promotion. So I'd just like to thank everyone. Thank you. I know it's late. But yes, that's all I have. Thank you.
Gracias a los dos. Quisiera saber si el público tiene alguna pregunta para los chicos, que son tan chicos. ¿No hay preguntas? Bueno, con esta mesa finalizamos el día de hoy. Los invitamos, por favor, a las mesas de mañana, que serán sobre conservación en su mayoría. Muchas gracias.